Picture this. You're dating an absolutely stunning woman. Smart, charming, magnetic. The kind of woman who turns every head the moment she walks into a room. You treat her like a queen. You buy her flowers, take her to expensive dinners, text her good morning every single day. You're being the perfect gentleman, exactly the way you were raised to be. But behind that perfection, something begins to break. Slowly, she starts losing interest. You don't understand why. You didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you gave her everything. And yet, her eyes no longer shine the same way when she looks at you. What I'm about to tell you might destroy everything you thought you knew about women and relationships. Because the truth, the one 97% of men refuse to accept, is uncomfortable, raw, and painfully real. For a woman to truly love you, to genuinely desire you, and to stay loyal, being a good man isn't enough. I'm Melkor Huamán, expert in persuasion and dark psychology, and welcome to Invisible Power, the place where we strip away illusions and reveal the invisible forces that shape desire, control, and emotional power. Today, I want you to erase everything you think you know about love, because you're not competing against other men. You're competing against her mind. Since ancient times, human attraction has been a silent battlefield. Sun Tzu once wrote that supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. And while love isn't a war, emotions follow the same invisible laws of dominance. When you make yourself too available, when you constantly try to please, you're not expressing love, you're surrendering power. And in the realm of emotion, power is never given. It's balanced. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Human nature doesn't move by gratitude, but by perception of value. What is abundant becomes devalued. What is scarce becomes desired. So when a woman senses that a man would do anything for her without expecting balance, something inside her switches off. Attraction fades, not because she's cruel, but because her subconscious stops seeing you as a challenge. And challenge, in the psychology of desire, is fuel. Robert B. Cialdini called it the principle of scarcity. The harder something is to obtain, the more valuable it becomes. In relationships, this principle can be either poison or power, depending on how you use it. If you're always available, your presence stops being a gift and turns into background noise. Most men make the mistake of thinking attraction is logical, that if they act kind, stable and loving, they'll be loved in return. But female desire doesn't respond to logic. It responds to emotion, tension, uncertainty. Dale Carnegie once said, "The only way to influence someone is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it." In love, what women want isn't perfection, it's emotion. The perfect man might impress her, but the man who makes her feel uncertainty, that man consumes her thoughts. A woman is drawn to a man who seems to have a purpose larger than her, a man who doesn't orbit around her attention, but around his own mission. Because emotional independence is the purest form of power. Edward Bernays, the father of modern propaganda, discovered that people don't act rationally. They react emotionally to symbols, impulses, and perception. We are not guided by logic. We are guided by influence. Love is no different. We don't choose with reason. We respond to the chemical chaos someone awakens inside us. So when you act like you don't need her, you're not playing games. You're communicating, at a subconscious level, that your worth isn't dependent on her validation. And in a world addicted to attention, that message hits harder than any declaration of love. Women don't fall for the man who worships them. They fall for the man who confuses them. The one who doesn't always reply. The one who doesn't over-explain. The one who doesn't ask permission to be himself. That man becomes a mirror of what she unconsciously desires, emotional control. Paul Ekman, pioneer in the study of human emotions, proved that the body reacts before the rational mind does. A glance, a pause, silence. These trigger more attraction than 1,000 words. Desire doesn't come from transparency. It comes from mystery. This is where dark psychology enters, not as manipulation but as awareness. Robert D. Hare, in his research on psychopathy, discovered something fascinating. Emotionally dominant people possess a calmness under pressure that others can't replicate. That calmness confuses, intrigues, and attracts. In love, that same trait becomes addictive. The man who doesn't react impulsively becomes an enigma. And as Aldous Huxley once said, The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age. The secret of attraction is similar. Carry mystery into predictability. It's not about pretending to be distant. It's about mastering the art of detachment. To understand that losing someone isn't the end. It's proof that you were never dependent in the first place. True magnetism doesn't come from what you say or do. It comes from who you are when you don't need to prove anything. Philip Zimbardo, in his research on human behavior, explained that context shapes actions. If you live in a mindset where you give everything out of fear of losing, you become predictable. But if you act from inner abundance, you radiate a force that no one can ignore. The man who doesn't beg for attention but commands presence changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. She begins to wonder what you're thinking, why you're so calm, why you seem unaffected by what would destroy others. And at that moment, the cycle of desire begins. When you don't depend, you dominate. When you don't need, you attract. When you don't beg, you inspire respect. This is the essence of masculine magnetism, the kind that no money, no looks, no status can fake. Kevin Dutton, in The Wisdom of Psychopaths, showed that traits like confidence, self-control, emotional detachment, and strategic composure can be virtues when used with ethics. The problem is that good men have been conditioned to fear their own strength. We were taught that being good was enough. But goodness without power is invisibility. And in the game of attraction, the invisible man doesn't exist. If you want to understand why she loses interest the more you give, look within. Ask yourself, what energy am I projecting when I seek approval? Am I seducing or am I pleading? Am I leading the dance or am I being led? At the deepest level, the feminine mind craves two things at once, security and excitement. Only a man who doesn't depend on her can provide both. Security is because his world doesn't collapse if she leaves. Excitement, because his behavior remains unpredictable, authentic, and free. That combination is lethal. When a woman realizes you don't need her, that you could walk away and still be yourself, her subconscious rebels. She begins to chase your attention, analyze your silence, crave your presence. Desire turns into obsession. That's why dark psychology isn't about manipulating others. It's about understanding the mechanisms that manipulate you. When you see them, you control them. And when you control them, you're free. From this moment forward, stop asking, how do I make her love me? Ask instead, how do I become a man who doesn't need her love to feel complete? That is the difference between being pursued and being forgotten. That is the foundation of everything that follows. Let's go deeper. Now that you understand the foundation, the hidden structure of attraction, it's time to see how these forces operate in real life, often without you realizing it. Every relationship is a psychological game played between two subconscious minds. And in that game, power doesn't belong to the one who gives the most, but to the one who needs the least. You see, the female mind, shaped by evolution and reinforced by culture, is wired to seek emotional security through challenge. That's the paradox most men never grasp. A woman feels drawn not to comfort, but to the tension between comfort and uncertainty. It's that oscillation that ignites emotional obsession. When a man is too predictable, her brain releases less dopamine, the chemical of anticipation and excitement. It's the same reason why people lose interest in routine. The reward system in the brain thrives on variability, not constancy. That's why a man who's always available becomes invisible, and the one who's slightly unpredictable becomes irresistible. In neuroscience, this is called intermittent reinforcement, a principle studied by B.F. Skinner. It's the same principle that keeps gamblers pulling the lever, waiting for that next unpredictable win. In relationships, women respond to the same psychological rhythm. If she doesn't know when she'll get your attention, or how much, her brain stays alert, emotionally invested, addicted. This doesn't mean playing games. It means understanding that attraction operates on uncertainty. When you remove uncertainty, you remove emotion. Let me give you an example. A man named Daniel once told me he was doing everything right with his girlfriend. He texted her constantly, told her how beautiful she was every day, planned every date, remembered every anniversary. But one day she simply said, "I need space." He was devastated. What happened? Her emotional system adapted. The mystery vanished. There was no contrast, no tension, no polarity left. Now contrast that with another man. Let's call him Adrian. Adrian genuinely cared, but his life didn't revolve around her. He had goals, discipline, silence. When he texted, his words carried weight because they weren't constant. His attention wasn't cheap. Within weeks, she began chasing him. Not because he was cruel, but because he radiated self-sufficiency, a quality that triggers deep biological attraction. Every woman desires the sensation of emotional gravity, being pulled into the orbit of a man who doesn't need her but chooses her. That's why the most magnetic men are those who move within a direction. Robert Greene calls this the law of absence. He wrote, "Too much circulation makes the price go down. The more you are seen and heard from, the more common you appear. Presence loses its value when it's constant." Now, let's break down the psychological tactics used, both consciously and unconsciously, by emotionally dominant people in relationships. The power of indifference isn't coldness, it's emotional control. It's the ability to choose not to react. And nothing destabilizes a manipulative or narcissistic person more than someone who refuses to be provoked. Robert D. Hare, in his work on psychopathy, noted that control is often maintained through emotional hooks, sudden affection, withdrawal, guilt, or chaos. When you stay calm, those hooks miss their target. You rob them of emotional leverage. When someone expects you to beg and you stay silent, they lose power. When they try to guilt trip you, and you remain serene, they lose control. This calmness, this emotional neutrality, is the weapon that ends psychological warfare. The law of emotional economy: never give more emotion than the other person is giving you. Emotional investment must remain proportional. Otherwise, imbalance becomes exploitation. Every time you overgive, you teach the other person that your energy costs nothing. That's how you unconsciously train them to undervalue you. This is Cialdini's law of reciprocity inverted. Once reciprocity disappears, manipulation begins. If you find yourself constantly explaining, convincing, or proving your worth, you've already surrendered your value. Stop negotiating your self-respect. Respect is never demanded. It's demonstrated through silence and boundaries. The principle of selective mystery doesn't mean distance. It means controlled revelation. Every detail you give about yourself should create curiosity, not closure. When a woman knows everything about you, she stops imagining. And imagination is the oxygen of desire. Paul Ekman showed that micro-expressions reveal emotions faster than words. The less you explain, the more people project their fantasies onto you. In attraction, that projection becomes obsession. That's why the quiet man, the one who doesn't overshare, often becomes the center of a woman's emotional gravity. She starts asking questions. She starts wondering. She starts feeling. The rule of reverse validation: most men seek validation. But the masters of persuasion, from Bernays to Carnegie, understood a deeper truth. The one who gives validation sparingly commands it abundantly. When you stop chasing validation and start observing, people adjust their behavior to earn your approval. In social dynamics, validation is currency. Spend it wisely, and people value your attention. Give it freely, and it becomes worthless. The mirror technique: dark psychologists, manipulators, and even high-level persuaders use this instinctively. They mirror the emotions of others, creating subconscious empathy. But here's the twist: you can use it ethically. When you reflect calmness, you neutralize tension. When you mirror indifference, you disarm control. Philip Zimbardo demonstrated that people conform to perceived power roles. When you maintain composure, others unconsciously frame you as the dominant presence in the interaction. You don't need to speak louder. You just need to be emotionally louder through silence, posture, and stillness. The law of withdrawal: most men fear losing access, but paradoxically, strategic withdrawal amplifies desire. Absence creates space for imagination, and imagination in attraction is more powerful than reality. Daniel Kahneman called this the anticipation effect. The human brain experiences more pleasure anticipating a reward than receiving it. When you step back, you become that reward. When you stop chasing, you become the prize. Recognizing the emotional predator: some individuals, narcissists, manipulators, emotional vampires, use the exact principles of dark psychology to control their partners. They oscillate between affection and cruelty, attention and silence, love and withdrawal. They weaponize uncertainty. How do you identify them? Look for inconsistency. When words don't match actions, when affection turns to distance without explanation, when everything feels like a test, you're not in love. You're being conditioned. Stephen Hassan, expert in cult psychology, described this as love bombing and devaluation. It's how manipulators create dependency. The antidote is self-awareness. Once you recognize the pattern, you remove the fuel that sustains their power, your reaction. Reclaiming power through detachment. Detachment isn't lack of love. It's love without dependency. Aldous Huxley said, "Experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you." When you detach emotionally, you start observing patterns instead of drowning in them. You become the analyst, not the victim. You learn to see the energy dynamics in every interaction. Who's chasing, who's pulling, who's leading. In that awareness, you stop playing their game. And when you stop playing, they lose. The power of silence. Silence is one of the most terrifying forces in communication. Most people are addicted to noise. They talk to fill the void because silence exposes insecurity. But in persuasion and attraction, silence magnifies your presence. When you don't respond immediately, you create mental pressure. The other person begins filling the silence with their own thoughts, projections, and insecurities. George K. Simon, in his studies on covert manipulation, stated that silence forces others to confront their internal dialogue. It's not passive. It's dominant. Use silence not as punishment, but as strategy. When you're silent, you're teaching others that your attention is earned, not owed. 10. Strategic empathy. The final principle of this section is perhaps the most misunderstood. Empathy isn't weakness, it's leverage when used with awareness. The ability to read emotions gives you insight into hidden motives. It allows you to predict reactions, prevent manipulation, and guide behavior. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Empathy with strategy is influence. Daniel Kahneman and Paul Ekman both showed that emotional intelligence correlates directly with persuasion power. When you understand what someone feels better than they do, you hold invisible authority over their emotions. That's why the most powerful people in the world, from politicians to seducers, aren't always the loudest or the strongest. They're the ones who understand psychology deeper than anyone else. In love as in life, power doesn't belong to the one who dominates others. It belongs to the one who masters himself. Every principle I've revealed here, scarcity, indifference, detachment, silence, is not about control. It's about clarity. When you master your emotions, you become unshakable. And when you're unshakable, no one can make you chase. That's when attraction reverses. That's when she starts wondering, why does he feel so calm? Why doesn't he need me? What is he thinking when he looks at me and says nothing? And in that silence, in that unspoken confidence, desire is reborn. Now that you've seen the patterns, it's time to step into the arena. Theory means nothing until it transforms your behavior. In this section, I'm not going to teach you how to control others. I'm going to teach you how to control yourself. Because in dark psychology, self-mastery is the highest form of dominance. Everything begins in silence. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the training ground of power. The man who can remain still when others panic commands reality itself. Niccolò Machiavelli once wrote, "Men are so simple and so much creatures of habit that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." But what happens when you're the one who no longer deceives himself? That's where true transformation begins. Emotional fasting. Every day you feed your emotions with constant stimulation, scrolling, texting, seeking validation. It's time to stop feeding that addiction. For 1 week, practice emotional fasting. Don't chase attention. Don't initiate contact. Don't explain your silence. Let people feel your absence. During this silence, observe how your mind reacts. You'll notice restlessness, fear, and the old urge to seek reassurance. That discomfort is not weakness, it's withdrawal. You're detoxing from emotional dependence. Once you pass that threshold, your mind becomes lighter. You start noticing how peaceful it feels to not need constant approval. That's the first stage of power, emotional independence. The mirror ritual: stand in front of a mirror each morning, not to admire yourself, but to confront yourself. Look into your own eyes and ask, What am I projecting to the world today, need or strength? Robert Greene calls this conscious self-theater. You are both the actor and the director of your emotional performance. Every day you choose the role you'll play in life, the beggar of attention, or the architect of presence. Your posture, your tone, your gaze, these are your invisible weapons. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. Stillness radiates dominance. When you control your expression, you control how others feel around you. People don't remember what you said. They remember what you made them feel. Strategic scarcity. If you want to increase your value in any relationship, romantic, social or professional, you must regulate access to your energy. Scarcity isn't arrogance. It's management. Most men give unlimited access to their time and attention, hoping it will make others appreciate them. It does the opposite. The more accessible you are, the less mysterious you become. And in the human psyche, mystery equals worth. Choose when to speak. Choose when to appear. Make absence part of your communication strategy. Remember what Robert Cialdini proved. People desire what seems rare. When your attention becomes selective, your presence becomes unforgettable. The Stoic reframe when something triggers you, rejection, insult, emotional distance, don't react. Reframe it. Ask yourself, what is this situation teaching me about control? Marcus Aurelius wrote that external events don't hurt us. Our judgment of them does. Dark psychology and stoicism are two sides of the same coin. Both seek mastery over impulse. You cannot influence anyone if you can't influence yourself. Every reaction you withhold increases your strength. Every silence you sustain multiplies your power. Reprogramming desire. The average man chases pleasure. The powerful man redefines it. Desire can either enslave you or refine you, depending on what you pursue. When you crave validation, your energy leaks. When you crave mastery, your energy compounds. Train your mind to find pleasure in patience. Find satisfaction in restraint. Each time you resist an emotional impulse, you burn weakness and forge willpower. That's what B.F. Skinner meant by behavioral conditioning. Repetition rewires reward. If you train your brain to associate silence with strength, detachment with dignity, and self-control with reward, you become psychologically bulletproof. The power of purpose, no psychological principle, no trick, no strategy will work unless you have a mission. A man without purpose will always orbit around a woman who has one. Purpose is the gravitational center of masculine energy. It gives meaning to silence, structure to chaos, and value to absence. When a woman senses a man living for something greater than validation, she feels the difference instantly. He's not playing games. He's simply too focused to be needy. Purpose protects you from emotional traps. When your attention is divided between your vision and your relationships, no single person can dominate your thoughts. As Aldous Huxley said, the more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline toward the religion of solitude. Purpose isn't isolation, it's inner direction. Controlled vulnerability. Most men think vulnerability is weakness. It's not. True vulnerability, when expressed selectively, is power. The difference lies in timing. If you expose your emotions too early, it signals dependence. If you reveal them after earning respect, it deepens connection. Psychologically, it triggers reciprocal openness. The other person feels safe enough to reveal themselves. But the key is control. You decide when, how much, and to whom. Emotional transparency without discipline is emotional suicide. The observation game. For the next 7 days, observe without reacting. Every time someone speaks to you, listen not just to their words, but to their tone, body language, rhythm, and hesitation. Paul Ekman discovered that 93% of communication is non-verbal. This means power belongs not to the talkers, but to the observers. Watch how people respond to silence. Notice how quickly they fill the gaps, how their stories shift to gain approval, how their eyes change when they feel judged. When you learn to read others without revealing yourself, you transcend manipulation. You become the strategist instead of the target. The detachment drill: choose one thing you're emotionally attached to. It could be a person, a routine, or even your phone, and practice controlled distance, not to punish yourself, but to regain authority over your attention. If you can't live without something, it owns you. Detachment doesn't mean coldness. It means freedom from emotional slavery. Every day move a little further from what drains your peace. Soon you'll realize the most intoxicating feeling in the world isn't lust or love. It's sovereignty. Daniel Kahneman proved that the human brain overestimates losses and underestimates gains. What you think you'll lose by detaching is an illusion. What you'll gain is power. 2. The reversal practice. Every morning, write down one situation where you acted emotionally, then rewrite it from the perspective of calm authority. Ask, what would the version of me who controls emotions do differently? This rewiring technique, used in cognitive behavioral therapy, builds what I call emotional muscle memory. Over time, your mind stops reacting from weakness and starts acting from strategy. That's how men evolve from emotional slaves to emotional architects. Halfway through your transformation, remember this: you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. When you become peace, you attract peace. When you become strength, you attract loyalty. When you become chaos, you attract drama. This is not metaphysics, and it's mirror psychology. People reflect the energy you broadcast. If you radiate self-control, the world treats you like a man of control. If you radiate neediness, the world treats you like a beggar of attention. It's not about pretending, it's about alignment. And now, as you integrate these practices, silence, scarcity, purpose, observation, you'll begin to notice a shift. People start leaning toward your energy. They speak softer when you listen. They wait for your reactions that never come. And in that pause, they feel your power. Because true dominance doesn't roar, it whispers. True strength doesn't chase, it attracts. And true love, the kind that stays, only gravitates toward a man who doesn't need it to exist. At this point, take a deep breath. You've crossed the threshold between awareness and mastery. Now it's time for the final transformation, not just controlling your emotions, but mastering the way others perceive you. That's where the line between influence and power disappears. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must stop chasing and start observing. When he must stop asking, "Why doesn't she love me?" and start asking, "Why don't I love myself enough to stop begging for it?" That moment, that quiet, invisible breaking point, is where transformation begins. Throughout your life, you've been conditioned to believe that love is earned through effort. Be kind, be generous, be available, be perfect. But here's the truth. What is earned through desperation will always end in disappointment. Love cannot exist where there is no respect. And respect cannot exist where there is no mystery. That's the paradox of attraction. The woman you want will only crave you when you no longer need her approval to feel complete. This isn't arrogance, it's evolution. The man who masters his emotions doesn't suppress them, he refines them. He doesn't fear rejection, he studies it. He doesn't run from solitude, he uses it to sharpen his presence. Sun Tzu taught that every battle is won before it's fought. And this battle, the war for your emotional sovereignty, is no different. The moment you understand your own mind, no one else can use it against you. The moment you realize that silence is stronger than explanation, detachment stronger than attention, purpose stronger than passion, you become untouchable. Aldous Huxley once said, "Experience teaches only the teachable." And in this world, very few are teachable, because very few are willing to face the darkness within themselves. But you are not like most men. You've chosen to look at what others run from, to understand what others mock, to master what others fear. That's what separates those who live as victims of emotion from those who rule their inner empire. The truth is, women don't become addicted to men who are cruel. They become addicted to men who embody peace, because peace is rare, and the rarest emotion always becomes the most desired. When a woman meets a man who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't need to argue to feel powerful, who can walk away with calm instead of chaos, her entire nervous system rewires itself. Her curiosity awakens. Her instinct surrenders, because deep down she feels what every human being craves but can't describe: safety wrapped in mystery, presence without pressure, power without pride. That's the paradox of masculine energy. It conquers without force, leads without words, and inspires without effort. And yet here's the secret that few understand. Everything you attract is a mirror of your inner discipline. If you attract chaos, it's because chaos lives within you. If you attract peace, it's because you've mastered yourself. If you attract indifference, It's because you still give where you shouldn't. Your external world is nothing more than your subconscious reflected back at you through other people. And the woman who ignores you today might simply be the universe's way of saying you're still not ready to meet your equal. So before you seek another person, seek yourself. Before you try to be loved, become love in its purest form, unneedy, self-contained, complete. That's when everything changes. That's when your silence speaks louder than words. That's when your presence makes her heartbeat change without you saying a single thing. Because what's truly attractive isn't your body, your money, or your looks. It's your energy, calm, focused, controlled. A man who radiates stillness in a world addicted to noise becomes a magnet for everything the world chases. Success, respect, desire, peace. And now, I want to leave you with one question. A challenge only a few will have the courage to answer honestly. If tomorrow every woman disappeared from your life, would you still know who you are? If the answer is no, then that is your mission. To build yourself so completely, so relentlessly, that your identity no longer depends on external validation. Because when you reach that point, when you can walk alone and still feel infinite, something miraculous happens. You stop chasing love, and love starts chasing you. That is not manipulation. That is magnetic equilibrium. It is what every man secretly seeks and what every woman subconsciously craves. The presence of a man who doesn't need to control to feel powerful. The world calls it detachment. I call it freedom. This is invisible power, where those who dare to understand themselves end up mastering everyone else. I'm Melkor Huamán, and remember, the most dangerous man is the one who has made peace with his own darkness.